Ladies and gentlemen, imagine for a moment a man standing alone, not by chance, but by design, by consequence, by some slow, creeping erosion of connection. A man with no friends. Society looks at him with suspicion, perhaps even contempt. Ah, there must be something wrong with him, they whisper. But is that truly the case? What does it mean to be utterly alone? Is it a failure or a challenge? A curse or a crucible? Because let me tell you something. Solitude, if you let it, can forge you into something remarkable. A man who stands alone is a man who has been given the opportunity, the burden, yes, but also the opportunity to wrestle with himself, to refine his character, to emerge stronger, sharper, and more formidable than he ever thought possible. The world will tell you that friendships are everything. Friendships are everything. And they are, when they are real, when they are earned, when they elevate you rather than dilute you. But before you can be the man who draws others in, you must first become the man who can stand firmly alone, and that is where your journey begins. Solitude is often seen as a punishment, a sign that something has gone wrong in a person's life. Society tells us that to be alone is to be broken, that a lack of friends signifies a lack of value. But this is a shallow interpretation, a failure to understand the deeper nature of isolation and its role in shaping an individual. There is a reason that throughout history the greatest thinkers, warriors, and leaders have spent long periods in solitude. It is not because they were cast out by the world, but because they understood something fundamental. Solitude is not merely an absence of people. It is an environment in which a man can confront himself in the most honest and unfiltered way possible. When a man is surrounded by friends, by constant social interaction, he is rarely forced to reckon with his true nature. The presence of others serves as a buffer against self-examination. He can lose himself in the opinions, validation, and distractions that companionship provides. But take that away and what remains? A man alone is a man who has nothing to shield him from the reality of who he is. This can be terrifying. It can expose weaknesses, insecurities, and unresolved conflicts within. It can force a man to face his shortcomings without the comfort of external reassurance. And yet, it is in this exact space that the most profound personal transformation can occur. Solitude is a crucible, a place where impurities are burned away, where what is weak is exposed and, if confronted with courage, strengthened. Many men avoid this process, fearing the discomfort that comes with deep self-reflection. They drown their solitude in distractions, endless entertainment, meaningless interactions, and mindless consumption. They mistake activity for progress, busyness for purpose. But the man who embraces his solitude, who stands in it without flinching, begins to see its hidden power. He begins to separate what is real from what is false, what is necessary from what is trivial. He learns to listen to his own thoughts without needing external validation. He discovers what he truly believes rather than what he has been told to believe. This process is painful. Now, it is not romantic, nor is it easy. It is a brutal confrontation with reality, with all of its weight and responsibility. A man who has no friends has the opportunity to strip away illusions about himself. He cannot rely on the comforting lies that others tell him or the distractions that social bonds provide. He must face his fears head on. He must acknowledge his weaknesses without excuse. He must look at his life with unflinching honesty and ask himself the hard questions. Who am I? What do I stand for? What am I building? Through this process, something remarkable happens. The man who endures solitude without breaking becomes something more than he was before. He becomes self-reliant. His confidence is no longer borrowed from the approval of others. It is forged from within. His values are not dictated by the crowd, but by his own hard-earned wisdom. His mind sharpens, his purpose clarifies, and his strength solidifies. The loneliness that once felt unbearable begins to transform into something else: independence, focus, discipline, fun. The world is full of men who fear being alone because they have never learned to stand on their own. They are desperate for companionship, not because they value true connection, but because they fear the silence of solitude. They avoid being alone with their thoughts because they do not know what they will find there. And so they settle for shallow friendships, for relationships that weaken rather than strengthen them. They accept mediocrity in their character because they never take the time to refine themselves. But the man who walks through solitude willingly, who embraces it rather than flees from it, emerges with something invaluable, a foundation that no external force can shake. There is a kind of power that only solitude can grant. It is the power of self-ownership, of knowing that you are not dependent on the opinions, validation, or presence of others to define your worth. It is the ability to stand in any room, in any situation, and remain unshaken because you have already faced the hardest battle, the battle with yourself. And a man who has been through this process does not need to seek approval. His presence commands respect. He does not need to beg for companionship. The right people will recognize his value. He does not crumble under pressure because he has already endured the fire of solitude and emerged stronger. The difference between a man who is alone and a man who has been shaped by solitude is the difference between weakness and strength, between fear and mastery. It is not the absence of friends that defines a man, but what he does with that absence. Those who waste it, who wallow in self-pity, who seek distraction instead of development, remain lost. Those who embrace it, who use it as a tool for growth, become something rare. Men who are unshakable, men who do not need to be rescued, men who have forged themselves into something greater. A man who finds himself alone without friends often faces a deep internal struggle. He wonders if something is inherently wrong with him, if he has failed in some fundamental way. Society reinforces this belief, telling him that friendships and social circles define a person's worth. But this perspective ignores a crucial truth. Before a man can have meaningful relationships, he must first become someone worth knowing. This is not a matter of external achievements or superficial charm. It is about the burden of responsibility, the responsibility to develop oneself, to grow in character, to build something solid before expecting others to invest their time and trust. Too often, men seek companionship as a way to escape responsibility. They look for friends, relationships, or social validation to fill a void within themselves that only personal growth can truly address. They assume that if they are surrounded by people, they must be doing something right. But the presence of others does not always indicate personal success. It can sometimes be a distraction from the work that needs to be done. It is easy to hide behind friendships, to avoid looking too closely at one's own shortcomings, to seek comfort in belonging rather than striving to become someone truly capable. Responsibility is not something that is given. It is something that is taken. A man who has no friends must recognize that before he can build meaningful connections, he must take responsibility for his own development. This means facing hard truths, acknowledging weaknesses, and committing to the slow, often painful process of self-improvement. It means no longer blaming circumstances, society, or other people for his loneliness. It means recognizing that no one owes him friendship, companionship, or validation. These things must be earned, and they are earned through effort, discipline, and character. Discipline and character. The burden of responsibility extends beyond self-improvement. It involves creating value in the world. People are drawn to those who offer something of substance, whether that be wisdom, skill, strength, or leadership. A man who takes responsibility for his own life becomes someone others want to be around. He does not need to chase friendships because his very presence commands respect and admiration. The opposite is also true. A man who lacks discipline, who refuses to take responsibility, who complains about his circumstances without working to change them, repels people. Even if he does manage to form relationships, they are likely to be weak, built on dependence rather than mutual respect. There is a harsh but necessary truth that many men struggle to accept. The world does not care about their loneliness. It does not pause to offer comfort or sympathy. It simply continues indifferent to their suffering. This is not cruelty. It is reality. It is reality. And reality demands that a man take responsibility for his own path. If he lacks friends, he must ask himself, why? Has he cultivated qualities that others respect? Has he built skills that others admire? Has he disciplined his mind and body to the point where he is capable of standing on his own? These questions are difficult, but they are necessary. A man who embraces responsibility does not wait for others to fix his problems. He does not waste time lamenting his solitude. Instead, he views it as an opportunity to sharpen himself. He works relentlessly. He works relentlessly on his mind, his body, his craft. He reads, he learns, he builds. He pushes himself beyond comfort, knowing that strength is not given but earned. He understands that friendships, like all things of value, require an investment of effort and discipline of effort. People respect those who respect themselves, who take their lives seriously, who do not seek handouts, but instead create opportunities through sheer determination. When a man takes full responsibility for his life, he no longer approaches relationships from a place of neediness. He is not desperate for companionship because he has built himself into someone who is already complete. He does not beg for acceptance because he has already accepted himself. This shift in mindset changes everything. Instead of asking, why doesn't anyone want to be my friend? He asks, so how can I become someone worth befriending? This is a powerful transformation. The burden of responsibility is heavy, but it is necessary. A man who refuses to carry it will remain weak, dependent, and unfulfilled. But a man who shoulders it willingly becomes something else entirely. He becomes a force to be reckoned with. He becomes someone others respect, someone whose presence is valued, someone who does not need validation, because he has built his worth through action, through discipline, through an unshakable commitment to becoming better every single day. A man without friends often feels the weight of solitude pressing down on him, leading him to believe that his worth is dictated by how others perceive him. In a world that constantly demands social proof, the temptation to seek validation from others becomes overwhelming. Many men fall into the trap of measuring their value based on how many people approve of them, how many acquaintances they have, or how often they are included in social circles. This pursuit of external validation, however, is a dangerous illusion. It creates a dependency on the opinions of others, weakening a man's ability to stand on his own. True self-respect is not found in the approval of others, but in the discipline and principles a man upholds when no one is watching. The need for validation is deeply ingrained in human nature. It is natural to want to be accepted, to be liked, to be recognized, but when this desire becomes a guiding force, it strips a man of his independence. He begins to shape himself not according to what he truly believes, but according to what he truly believes, but according to what he thinks will earn him approval. He changes his words, his actions, even his values just to fit into a group. In doing so, he sacrifices his authenticity. He becomes a reflection of others' expectations rather than a man of his own making. This is a hollow existence, a fragile foundation that can collapse the moment external approval is withdrawn. The danger of seeking social validation is that it places control of a man's self-worth in the hands of others. If his confidence is built upon the praise of others, what happens when that praise disappears? If his sense of purpose is tied to being liked, what happens when he faces rejection? A man who relies on external validation is at the mercy of forces beyond his control. He is never truly free because his identity is shaped by the shifting opinions of those around him. Self-respect, on the other hand, is built from within. It is not given by others. It is earned through discipline, integrity, and the relentless pursuit of personal excellence. A man with self-respect does not compromise his values to gain approval. He does not dilute his beliefs to fit in. He stands firm in what he knows to be true, regardless of whether others recognize it. This is not arrogance, it is strength. It is the confidence that comes from knowing that his worth is not contingent on external validation, but on his own actions, his own principles, his own ability to navigate the world with discipline and resolve. Many men make the mistake of believing that popularity equates to worth. They assume that being well-liked means they are doing something right, but popularity is often superficial. It is not a reflection of character, intelligence, or competence. It is merely a measure of how well someone can conform to what others want. A man who values self-respect over social validation does not concern himself with being popular. He is far more interested in being respected, and respect is not won through conformity. It is earned through strength, through mastery, through unwavering commitment to personal growth. This does not mean that friendships and relationships are unimportant. They are essential, but they should be built on genuine connection, not the desperate need for approval. A man who respects himself attracts the right kind of people, people who value him for who he truly is, not for who he pretends to be. He does not beg for attention, nor does he chase after those who do not recognize his worth. Instead, he focuses on becoming the kind of man who naturally commands respect through his actions and character. There is immense freedom in detaching from the need for constant validation. A man who no longer seeks approval is a man who can think independently, act decisively, and stand firm in the face of opposition. He is not easily swayed by criticism, nor is he desperate for praise. He understands that external recognition is fleeting, but self-respect, once earned, is unshakable. His confidence is not an act, not a mask worn to impress others, but a deep and unshakable belief in his own abilities and principles. The path to true self-respect is not easy. It requires sacrifice. It requires rejecting the easy road of conformity in favor of the harder road of discipline. It means being willing to be misunderstood, to be criticized, to be overlooked. But in the end, it grants something far more valuable than fleeting approval. It grants the ability to walk through the world with unshakable confidence, to remain steadfast in the face of adversity, to live a life guided not by the opinions of others, but by an unbreakable commitment to personal excellence. A man without friends often feels the pressure to surround himself with people, believing that sheer numbers will provide a sense of belonging and fulfillment. The modern world glorifies social connections, promoting the idea that having a wide network equates to success, status, and happiness. This belief is misleading. It is not the quantity of friendships that defines a man, but their quality. 100 acquaintances mean nothing if none of them stand by you when it truly matters. 1,000 social interactions amount to nothing if they lack depth, sincerity, and mutual respect. True connection is rare, and it cannot be manufactured through socializing alone. It must be earned and cultivated with care. The problem many men face is that they are so desperate to avoid loneliness that they lower their standards for companionship. They surround themselves with people who do not challenge them, who do not inspire them, who do not contribute to their growth in any meaningful way. They mistake proximity for friendship, assuming that simply being around others will bring them fulfillment. But shallow relationships do not nourish the soul. They may provide temporary relief from loneliness, but they ultimately leave a man feeling empty. He begins to notice that despite being surrounded by people, he is still alone. Conversations lack substance, interactions feel forced, and the connection never goes beyond the surface. A man who values himself does not settle for just any company. He understands that true friendships are based on shared values, mutual respect, and a willingness to push each other toward greatness. He does not seek validation through the number of people in his life, but rather through the strength of the bonds he builds. He would rather have one true friend who challenges him to be better than 100 who enable his mediocrity. This is not arrogance, it is wisdom. It is the understanding that relationships should serve a higher purpose than mere convenience. The pursuit of high-quality friendships requires patience. Requires a willingness to walk alone rather than accept companionship that does not align with one's values. This is difficult because solitude is uncomfortable. It forces a man to confront himself, to examine his weaknesses, to acknowledge where he needs to grow. But it is in this solitude that he develops the strength necessary to attract the right people into his life. A man who knows his worth, who stands firm in his beliefs, who pursues excellence relentlessly, he will naturally draw others who share his mindset. He does not need to seek out friendships desperately because his very existence, his actions, and his discipline make him someone others respect and admire. Weak men fear loneliness so much that they compromise their integrity just to be accepted. They change their opinions to match the crowd, laugh at jokes they do not find funny, and engage in behavior that goes against their own values, all in the name of fitting in. But fitting in at the cost of authenticity is the fastest way to lose oneself. A man should never sacrifice his principles for social approval. If a group of people does not respect him for who he truly is, then they are not worth his time. Many of the greatest men in history walked their paths alone before they found those who truly understood them. They were ridiculed, isolated, and underestimated, but they did not let this deter them. Instead, they used their solitude to refine themselves, to sharpen their minds, to build something meaningful. And when the right people came along, they did not need to beg for friendship. And so their actions, their strength, and their convictions spoke for them. A man who has no friends should see this not as a failure, but as an opportunity. It is a chance to set higher standards, to cultivate himself into someone worthy of deep, meaningful connections. It is a time to focus on his goals, to discipline his mind and body, to build a life so solid that he does not depend on the presence of others for his sense of worth. Friendships should be a reflection of the life a man has built, not a means to escape from the responsibility of self-improvement. When he becomes the kind of man who does not need others to validate his existence, he will find that the right people will naturally gravitate toward him. They will not be drawn to him because he sought their approval, but because he has built himself into someone of value, someone worth knowing. A man without friends often struggles with the question of why he is alone. He may believe that something is inherently wrong with him, that he is unlikable, or that others have simply chosen to exclude him. But instead of dwelling on these thoughts, he must turn his attention inward and ask a more important question. What am I building? A man without purpose is a man drifting through life, and others can sense this. People are drawn to those who have direction, who are engaged in something meaningful, who possess a vision greater than themselves. If a man has no friends, it may not be because he is unworthy of connection, but because he has yet to construct a life that demands respect and admiration. Mastery and purpose are the foundation upon which a man builds his identity. Without them, he is at the mercy of his environment, moving wherever circumstances push him, rather than taking control of his own path. The first step in transforming his life is choosing something to pursue with relentless dedication. It does not matter what this pursuit is, whether it is a craft, a skill, a profession, or a philosophy. What matters is that he commits to it fully. When a man devotes himself to mastery, he naturally becomes someone of value. His presence carries weight because he has something real to offer. He is no longer merely seeking companionship. He is creating something that gives his life meaning. Too many men waste their time chasing social acceptance instead of building themselves into individuals worth respecting. They spend hours seeking approval, trying to impress others with empty words and gestures, hoping that someone will take notice of them. But respect is never given freely. It is earned through action, through discipline, through a relentless commitment to something greater than oneself. A man who is dedicated to his craft does not have to beg for attention. His work speaks for itself. People take notice not because he demands it, but because excellence is impossible to ignore. Purpose is what gives a man the ability to stand alone without feeling lost when he wakes up each day with a clear mission. Solitude does not feel like a burden, it feels like an opportunity. He does not need constant social interaction to feel fulfilled because his work provides him with a deeper sense of satisfaction. The man who lacks purpose, on the other hand, feels restless in solitude. He seeks out distractions, desperately filling his time with meaningless activities, avoiding the uncomfortable truth that he has yet to define his own path. A man who commits himself to mastery inevitably attracts others who share his mindset. Those who respect hard work and discipline will be drawn to him. They will see in him the qualities they admire, and genuine connections will form naturally. This is how true friendships are built, not through forced socialization or desperate attempts to fit in, but through shared values and mutual respect for each other's dedication to something meaningful. A man who has cultivated mastery does not need to seek out friendships artificially because his presence alone will command respect. The path to mastery is not easy. It requires sacrifice, discipline, and an ability to endure long periods of solitude. There will be times when progress feels slow, when doubt creeps in, when the effort seems futile, but this is where most men fail. They give up before they see the results of their labor. Those who persevere, who continue to refine their craft day after year, eventually reach a level where their skills cannot be ignored. And with that mastery comes a sense of self-worth that no amount of external validation can provide. The modern world is full of distractions, constantly pulling men away from meaningful pursuits. Social media, entertainment, and shallow interactions offer temporary relief, but ultimately leave a man feeling empty. He must be ruthless in his discipline, cutting away anything that does not serve his greater purpose. He must learn to say no to things that waste his time and energy, focusing instead on building something that will outlast him. When he does this, he will find that he no longer cares about meaningless social validation. He will no longer crave attention because his work will provide all the fulfillment he needs. A man without friends has a choice. He can see his solitude as a curse, as evidence that he is somehow lacking, or he can see it as a rare opportunity. a time to dedicate himself fully to something that will transform him into a person of true value. If he chooses the latter, he will find that the friendships he eventually forms will be based on something far deeper than mere social convenience. They will be built on mutual respect, on a recognition of each other's dedication and strength. And at that point, friendship will not be something he desperately seeks. It will be something he naturally attracts. A man without friends often experiences a deep sense of isolation, a feeling that he exists on the fringes of society, unseen and unacknowledged. In moments of solitude, it is easy to believe that something is fundamentally wrong, that there is an inherent flaw in one's personality or nature. But this perception is not always a reflection of reality. Many great men throughout history have walked long stretches of their lives alone. Not because they were unworthy of companionship, but because they were undergoing the necessary process of transformation. Solitude, when embraced correctly, is not a curse but a crucible. It is the place where a man is forged into something greater, where he builds the strength, character, and resilience that will define him for the rest of his life. The modern world fears solitude. It bombards people with endless distractions, encourages constant interaction, and equates social activity with happiness. But a man who cannot sit alone in a room with his own thoughts is not truly free. He is dependent on the presence of others to feel at ease, to feel validated, to feel like he has a place in the world. This is a dangerous weakness because it makes him vulnerable to external influences. If he needs constant engagement to feel whole, then he will always be at the mercy of others' approval and attention. True strength comes from the ability to stand alone, to face oneself without distraction, and to find purpose in solitude. Solitude strips away illusions. It forces a man to confront the reality of who he is without the noise of social validation to shield him from the truth. Many people avoid this confrontation by drowning themselves in entertainment, shallow conversations, or meaningless pursuits. They do not want to face the uncomfortable realization that they have not yet built themselves into someone they respect. But a man who embraces solitude sees it as an opportunity, a time to grow, to reflect, to develop himself into someone stronger and more capable. He does not run from loneliness, he uses it as fuel. The process of transformation in solitude is not easy. It requires a brutal level of self-honesty. A man must look at himself objectively and ask hard questions. What are my weaknesses? What have I neglected in my personal development? Where have I failed to take responsibility? These questions are uncomfortable, but they are necessary. A man who cannot examine himself critically will never improve. The solitude he experiences is not a punishment. It is an invitation to become better. This period of isolation is where self-mastery begins. Without the constant input of others, a man can focus entirely on refining his skills, strengthening his mind, and building the habits that will serve him for the rest of his life. He reads, he studies, he trains his body, he hones his craft. He pushes himself beyond what is comfortable, knowing that discomfort is the price of growth. While others waste time seeking validation, he is building himself into someone worthy of respect. And when he emerges from this period of solitude, he is not the same man he once was. He is sharper, more disciplined, more capable. He carries himself with quiet confidence, not because others have told him he is worthy, but because he has proven it to himself, Mom. The ability to embrace solitude also grants a man something incredibly rare in today's world, an unshakable sense of inner peace. He does not fear being alone because he understands that his value is not dependent on external affirmation. He can walk through life with a sense of purpose that is independent of social trends, peer pressure, or fleeting popularity. This makes him immune to manipulation, to the need to conform, to the desperate desire to please others. He is centered, grounded, and in full control of himself. Ironically, it is often the man who has learned to stand alone who eventually attracts the strongest connections. When a man no longer needs approval, he becomes more attractive to those who respect strength and independence. People are drawn to those who are self-sufficient, who do not seek validation, but instead radiate an unspoken authority. This is why the friendships and relationships that come after a period of solitude tend to be deeper, more meaningful, and built on a foundation of mutual respect rather than insecurity. A man without friends is not doomed to a life of loneliness. He is simply in a stage of becoming. If he chooses to use this time wisely, if he embraces the discomfort of solitude and turns it into fuel for growth, then he will emerge from it stronger than ever. He will no longer seek friendships out of desperation, but will attract them naturally through the sheer force of his character and discipline. The time spent alone will not have been wasted, and it will have been the foundation upon which his future is built.